All right, so in this video, our first goal is to look at what is it that the body needs? What are the main nutrients that our body requires to survive and thrive on a day-to-day basis? And this can be broken down into what we call macro, large, and micro, small nutrients. Let's start with micronutrients. Micronutrients really fit into vitamins, minerals. These are all things that you may have heard, electrolytes even, sodium, potassium, chloride, iron, and then all of these vitamins that you may have heard of, like things in B complex or vitamin D and vitamin A and vitamin E. Micronutrients, the interesting piece about them is that not every food is going to contain every micronutrient. And when we talk about micronutrients in detail, this will make a little bit more sense. But the main focus I want to offer you in terms of being able to get all of your micronutrients is diversity. A diversity of foods is the way we are going to get all of our micronutrients. The second piece I want you to understand is there is a difference between getting micronutrients in supplementation form, like a tablet or a powder, versus micronutrients coming from your food. The beauty of micronutrients coming from your food is that sometimes certain nutrients need to come together in order for the body to best absorb them. And that really only comes when you eat it in food form. There are going to be some micronutrients that maybe you're deficient in, for example, iron or magnesium. And sometimes a provider or you yourself may decide it's time for me to take a supplement. Use that supplement wisely. Use it for a period of time in which you do your research and find foods that are high in these micronutrients and try to absorb them in that time and make that a regular part of your nutrient consumption. That would be sort of a long-term goal, for example. But again, micronutrients, when we think about them, I want you to think diversity. Diversity is the way, and we will talk a lot more in detail about that. Now in the macronutrient category, we have three main types of macronutrients that I want you to think about: proteins, fats, and carbohydrates. So let's take protein. Proteins are the building blocks of life. And when you think building blocks, you can think of it in terms of Legos, or you can even think of it in terms of the alphabet. Take your name, for example. When a body, let's say your name is that of a fruit. So let's say your name is apple. When the body recognizes this fruit, if the fruit comes in a very beautiful natural process, a undamaged sort of process, it will recognize the APPLE in that fruit. And once that's absorbed, it will be able to use the APPLE for various developments inside the body. For example, maybe the A will go for a arm cell, or a P will go for something else. But the idea here is that the more unprocessed that protein comes to the body, the more of those alphabets, quote unquote, that the body can recognize, and it can use it for whatever it needs to use it for. So building blocks is the function of protein. Fats are going to be your lubrication. So when I say lubrication, I want you to think about joint spaces or the sinuses and the entire cavities of the face, and even the brain in terms of signaling. You also think about fat, we think about grease, right? As you're listening to this video right now, you're hearing this information at such a quick speed. And for your nerve cells to be able to transmit this information in a way that you understand, you need grease. But in the same light, when the grease is inflammatory, sometimes that leads to inflammatory symptoms instead of healthy symptoms. So for example, if the fat in the joint space is inflamed, it's coming from a bad source or not such a good source, that might lead to symptoms like arthritis. Or if, for example, it's coming into the sinuses, that might lead to things like allergies and sinusitis. Or maybe in the brain, that might lead to things like brain fog. So in that sense, when you consume fats, the more anti-inflammatory they are, the more holistic and real they are, the less inflammation you're going to get in the areas that these fats source. The other very important place that fats are going to come into play is in the development of your hormones, your endocrine system. And we will talk a little bit more about that when we go into detail about fats. and carbohydrates as your energy source. This is going to be your fuel. Now, the simplest way I want to explain this is, number one, if you had to go fill up your car with either gasoline or electricity every single minute of the day, is that really a productive use of your time? Or would you prefer to be able to fill up gasoline or energy once and let it sustain you for the 24 hours of the day? The preference tends to be that sustained release of energy. So when we talk about carbohydrates, there are a couple of categories that we're going to hit on. But one of the main things we want to think about with carbohydrates is the timing of our carbohydrate intake and the type, the sustained release type being the main preference. So I'm hoping this little nutrient breakdown gives you an idea of what type of nutrients your body requires in order to be able to sustain on a day-to-day basis. Understanding this basic breakdown, now we can develop from that. We can start talking about each category individually to better understand how to get those sources. What are the best versions of a protein, of a fat, or a carbohydrate? So I'll see you in the next video, and let's go from here.